Hi guys, the theory I'm going to be discussing today is the muted group theory. Muted group theory was created by Edwin and Shirley Ardiner in 1975, but was expanded on and brought into the field of communication by Chris Kamari. Essentially, this theory revolves around two groups, a dominant group and a non-dominant group. Dominance equates power. Therefore, a dominant group is a group that holds power and privileges over non-dominant groups. Non-dominant groups, therefore, would equate lack of power. This theory focuses on the different ways communication practices of dominant groups suppress non-dominant groups. Suppression can occur as non-verbal or verbal forms of communication. This theory takes on a gender perspective where males are considered to be the dominant group and women are considered to be the non-dominant group. Although this theory focuses predominantly on women as the muted group, it can be applied to other groups in society as well. For instance, in today's society, people of color would be considered a non-dominant group, whereas whites would be considered a dominant group. When oppression is implemented into society, these non-dominant groups must learn to adapt to the communication system, which is of course established by the dominant group. Who doesn't, and it offers methods to assist in equating the level of power amongst the dominant and non-dominant groups. As stated previously in my meta theory project, I claimed that the interpretive approach to knowing was my favorite approach because it advocates for individual opinions and claims that individuals do have free will and choice. I resonated with this approach in the beginning of the semester because I believed it aligned accordingly with my personality. However, after further studying these approaches, I have come to the realization that I resonate more with a critical approach. A critical approach to knowing recognizes that truth and knowledge are connected to power. This approach also claims that our laws and rules are created by those associated with higher power and authority. The ontology within a critical approach accounts for subjectivity and power inequity. The interpretive approach accounts for only subjectivity. The axiology for both approaches is relatively similar in the fact that they both recognize biases. The interpretive approach claims that biases exist, and since they cannot be set aside, they must be acknowledged. It claims that yes, although the acknowledgement of biases is important, the exploiting of biases is just as important because exposing biases leads to inequalities being rightened. Lastly, the epistemology within a critical approach attempts to discover truths by breaking through false consciousness of individuals, while the interpretive approach accounts for the existence of multiple truths. Approach to knowing because I believe it is more realistic and provides a stronger set of answers or a clearer set of understanding pertaining to what is right or wrong. With that said, muted group theory would by far be my favorite theories that we have explored and studied within this course. I personally enjoyed learning about this theory because as a female I can strongly relate to the assumptions and conclusions outlined within it. There are three major assumptions that fundamentally frame the muted group theory. The first assumption relates to the diverse perception between men and women based on their experiences and division of labor. The assumption relates to the idea that women are responsible for tasking around the house, whereas men are responsible for work outside the house. Unfortunately, this assumption is represented within my everyday life. My parents immigrated to Michigan when they were just teenagers, and as they grew up, this idea was engraved into them, and therefore, from my observations, they have a different mindset than other parents. For instance, my father owns and operates his own business, but for as long as I can remember, my mother has never been employed. She considers herself a housewife and spends majority of her time doing housework. She cooks, she cleans the house, and she cleans up after my brothers and father. I actually have never seen them put their own dish in the sink, if I'm being honest. However, when it comes to my messes, she claims that I must clean up after myself because I'm a girl. This example relates exceptionally well to this first assumption because it creates the diverse perception between me, a female, and my brothers who are male. I'm obviously studying communication, so I have the ability to recognize this, whereas my brothers don't. Ultimately, I am aware of this gender role idea, and that it's simply that, just an idea. However, my brothers will grow up with this idea conditioned into them and eventually into their future families. Essentially, the second assumption states that men enact power politically, suppressing the ideas and thoughts of women. Personally, I have witnessed multiple examples of this assumption. One significant example that comes to mind are the claims that are made regarding men being more dominant in math than women. The other day I stumbled across an article that was headlined a similar statement, however there was no sufficient evidence to back up the claim. Therefore, the audience is left believing this claim, allowing men to continue to enact political power, whereas women's thoughts and ideas are suppressed. The final assumption asserts that in order for women to participate in society, they must convert to the translation process of the male group. This assumption is also represented within my everyday life. I grew up with two younger brothers, and therefore I'm the only girl in the family besides my mom. I am the oldest amongst my brothers, but they are closer in age than they are with me. Growing up, I always felt left out because I was excluded from their shared commonalities. Eventually, I succumbed to the loneliness and adapted their translation process. I began learning how to play video games and sports, even though I didn't have an authentic interest in them. However, they continued to invite me to hang out with them, and I liked that, so I continued to pretend to enjoy those things. This relates to the assumption because it is one of many examples that proves women must convert to the translation process of male groups to participate in society. Muted group theory also claims that non-dominant groups are silenced. Therefore, the silencing process within this theory is significantly important. The methods learned include ridicule, ritual, control, and harassment, though silencing is not limited to those 4 methods and can occur in many other forms. Firstly, ridicule is the criticization of women's speech. For instance, on Twitter the other day, I saw a male acquaintance tweet, "If your girlfriend is funny, hold on to her, because females are not funny," which is an untrue statement pertaining to this first method of silencing. Secondly, ritual relates to the social situations that silence women. The aspect of clubbing is an outstanding example of this. I often complain to my friends about how many bars and clubs have strict dress codes, which usually only pertain to women. Women are expected to dress provocatively, such as tight and revealing clothing and uncomfortable heels, whereas men have the freedom to dress as they please. For instance, the other day my friend Julian wore a sweatshirt, jeans, and tennis shoes to the club. On the other hand, I was extremely uncomfortable but could not dress in a similar fashion because I would not have been allowed in. This example relates to the process of silencing because women follow the standard and do not get to express themselves, such as their desire of what they want to wear when they go out. Thirdly, control refers to male dominance within communication and media. I mainly notice this element within television, primarily pertaining to sports. Male dominance is extremely evident within this form of media. Although there are several female sports broadcasters, they are often mocked and criticized, rather than praised like males within the field. In addition, I have witnessed several instances where a fellow male broadcaster has interrupted a female broadcaster without allowing her the chance to even finish her sentence. This is a common form of silencing and is significantly important to recognize because it could leave the woman feeling as though what she has to say is not good enough or important enough. Ultimately, this can cause doubts and uncertainties which can affect her life altogether. The last method of silencing is harassment, which can occur in 2 forms, street harassment and sexual harassment. The last method of silencing is harassment, which may occur in 2 forms, street harassment and sexual harassment. Street harassment refers to the verbal threats women receive while in public spaces. These threats are often referred to as compliments. Sexual harassment refers to the making of unwanted sexual advances. Both apply to this process because women feel as though if they speak up, they will be labeled as overdramatic or hysterical, therefore they remain silent. Nonetheless, this theory also discusses the strategies for resistance against the silencing process. The first strategy advises the non-dominant to name the process of the silencing as it occurs. By implementing this method, the process that was used becomes an open topic for discussion. Another strategy is to encourage the reclamation of practices that are thought to be a woman's job, such as knitting, sewing, and many others, because by reclaiming these practices, men and women can recognize that this is a communicative experience. The last strategy involves the creation of new language for uniquely gendered experiences. Words have meanings, and gender is often embedded within several words and common expressions. For example, there are more negative words pertaining to women's genitalia than to men's, and when these words are applied and expressed to another individual, they indicate a sense of worthlessness, inexpensiveness, disgust, or whatever the situation may be. Ultimately, these words are expressed in an attempt to silence and degrade the other individual. However, the creation of new language would assist in putting an end to this process. In all, muted group theory can be applied to numerous situations. However, its major weakness pertains to the fact that it does not have the capability to explain all interactions. Another weakness includes the fact that men are sometimes classified as the muted group as well. Nonetheless, it has significant strengths in identifying a new understanding of people, clarification of value, and reforming society. I truly enjoyed learning about this theory and seeing where it is implemented in my personal life. I will continue to identify related situations and attempt to use the methods of resistance to end the silencing process. I hope you guys learned a thing or two and will implement these methods as well. Thank you.